Hello and welcome back to Old Soul Podcast. My name is Bree, that's spelled B-R-E-I. Thank you so much. Today's film commentary is about the film Jurassic Park. It was released in 1993 and it has a rating of PG-13 with a runtime of 2 hours and 7 minutes. The director of this film is Steven Spielberg. Alright, so I'm just going to go right into it. My first topic for this film is more centered around the things that I didn't notice when I was a younger kid and watching this film versus being an adult, because I realized as I was watching, as most people do when they watch something at different stages of their life, which just happens to be sort of time-stamped by your age range, you notice so many things that you just didn't notice before. But mostly for me, I hadn't really remembered all the first half of the movie. So basically everything that happened before all of the attacks from the dinosaurs began. So the first half of the movie, which I feel like is a distinctive change in tone, is us getting to know our main character Grant and Ellie, and I believe that they're under the category of paleontologists, archaeologists, things like that, but they specifically study dinosaur bones. They're always sort of in the dirt, digging, and they're being funded by Hammond at the time for whatever project they were currently doing. And you see that when, we get a little snippet of what Ellie and Grant were doing in their jobs, and they're in a relationship of some sort because they seem to be very close and intimate in a very loving way, and they kind of go back and forth about the idea of children and how Grant's sort of like about it, which is totally relatable, and Ellie, who's just sort of like, oh, but they're cute, but she also doesn't seem to like be forcing it. She just thinks that he's good with kids a lot more than he gives himself the appreciation for or the credit for. We see all that, and we also see that some helicopter arrives on their site, and they're freaking out because this person is, messing up the bones that they found, and could potentially mess up any sort of research from any tangible evidence that they get from the bones. And we see that Hammond, who is the person who is funding and basically created Jurassic Park, which the two paleontologists or two scientists, I might refer to them because they didn't distinctively say paleontology, but I'm assuming it is, right? He basically has already been funding whatever has been going on, because immediately when they realize it's him, they change their whole attitude. Like, oh, whoever the asshole is that just landed his plane on this land really is fucking up our studies and our research. But then when they realize it's him, and they're like, oh, and they're getting super respectful. So clearly there's that distinction. And Ellie does the same thing right after Grant, so he goes in first and sort of changes his attitude, and then she goes in. And Hammond is basically there because we see a shot before that where there's this lawyer who is afraid that the investors of this project are going to not want to continue on with this project, and that's mostly because an employee of the park was recently killed, and the family is seeking compensation. And also, this is a park, Jurassic Park has not officially opened yet. So Hammond seems to have a lot of money or a lot of creation and maybe past investments that did well. So he has a lot of investors who are wanting to create this park, which is basically a park that has reestablished a theme park for people to go and see dinosaurs and also have that sort of theme park experience. But the dinosaurs are real. They're not like holograms. It's not like a museum where you just see the bones, although there does seem to be elements of that in certain parts. This is entirely real dinosaurs, and that's what makes it groundbreaking. And so we have that going on, and basically we see that the thing that allowed them to be able to bring dinosaurs back is that they found this mosquito from like ancient times. I suppose it's ancient, yeah, maybe even later than that. But they found this mosquito that would have been around when dinosaurs were around, and it would have taken the blood of a dinosaur to feed itself. And so this mosquito was discovered in pretty good condition, enough that they could get its DNA, thus getting dinosaur DNA. And then they were able to re-establish and basically clone dinosaurs based off of DNA and genetics. And there's even a whole part in the film where at the theme park, when Ellie and Grant are finally there, they get a whole overview of what Hammond and the scientists have done to produce real dinosaurs in real time. We hear about how the scientists made sure every dinosaur was female, which we find out later didn't necessarily work. You know, laws of nature. I don't know how that happened. I didn't really understand that either, but they tried to make everyone female so that there could be no procreation or breeding, and that was like their way of controlling their population and another way to control the dinosaurs. And of course, they have them locked up in certain exhibits. The omnivores seem to be a little more free roaming versus others that are probably more caged in, or they have sort of exhibits where they make the dinosaurs feel like they're actually predator and prey. So they were releasing like live sheep and cows to them, which is kind of inhumane. I mean, I feel like they could have at least killed the cow before delivering them to the dinosaur, but then that defeats the purpose of like the predator and prey thing. And most, if not many, of the dinosaurs are predators, so there's just a lot going on there. But I just don't distinctively remember any of that when I was a child, and I'm pretty sure it's because of all the scientific, mathematical things that I wouldn't have understood. But I feel like I've seen it when I was a teenager, and I still just really did not remember any part of that. I just remember the part where the dinosaurs are chasing everyone around, which of course is the easier thing to remember. No, right? So I really, really enjoyed watching this again. I was just like, it's a classic. I haven't seen it in a while. Let's watch it. Let's do a commentary about it. And so it was nice to just notice a lot of other things that I hadn't noticed before. And then I need to mention that Hammond brings on the scientist again because there's too much of a liability after one of the workers got killed, and the investors are wanting to pull out, and the lawyers are getting involved. So basically, Grant and Ellie are summoned by Hammond, which is why he showed up to that site, to go and basically back his theme park, and that's why Hammond's trying to give them the experience of what an actual visitor or paying customer would get if they went to Jurassic Park and they had paid or whatever, so on and so forth, before they can officially open the park, although everything seems to be pretty ready for people to start entering. Hammond also brings along his 2 grandchildren, and I believe one of them is named Timmy or Tim, and the other one is Lex. And then he has like coders and tech IT guys who basically are in charge of like the security systems and things like that, which we find later becomes an issue when he's having an argument, a lot of back and forth with one of the people. It says that his name is Nedry or Nedry. I'm just going to call him Ned because I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Ned becomes quite the character / villain in this story, and a big reason why a lot of this has gone wrong. But I do think that even if Ned hadn't been a main reason as to why the dinosaurs got out, which I'll explain later, I do think that eventually when you find out that the dinosaurs were actually breeding, that would have been another cause for chaos, but also just the idea of having and bringing back something that was once extinct forever ago is a moral thing that comes up, which I'll talk about in the next topic. But I think it would have gone wrong anyway. It would have just been a little later in the process, right? Okay. So, and I think the only other person that shows up is a character who I like, but I do find a little bit annoying, but he is really funny and has like a lot of quotable dialogue. And I think Jeff Goldblum, who is the actor of this character, Malcolm, I think he did a really good job. And I really enjoyed his character. I just found him a little annoying when he kept like flirting with Ellie. It just got to a point where clearly she wasn't into you, dude. Come on. But he was really great in this film. So Malcolm is also like a scientist / doctor of some sort. They brought up mathematics, but I can't really narrow down what they said before. But either way, he's also very smart. He's just more like, he comes across as like a ladies' man, sort of doesn't care, cool, suave type guy, but he's also really smart and knowledgeable. And there's even a part where he tries to help Grant and the children when they're in danger. So you see a little more of his humanistic characteristics and him being sort of like a hero in a time of very, very dangerous situations. So, yeah, all Ellie, Grant, and Malcolm were there to do was to sort of give the backing to the lawyer. The lawyer brought Malcolm, and Hammond brought Ellie and Grant, and they were supposed to experience the park and tell, give the go ahead, like, I am backing this. I think it's good. I think they should open. There shouldn't be any big issues. Which, again, I still feel like that wouldn't have happened even if Ned hadn't ruined a lot of things with his little revenge plot, because often in the film, once Grant and Ellie and everyone is at the park and they start going on this tour, this adventure of the theme park with the grandchildren, Malcolm, all of them together, the lawyer. I think there's another worker, Muldoon or something like that. He's another guy that was there, Muldoon or something like that. And then the tech guys and the scientists are all in the background. You get a few snippets of them occasionally, trying to keep things together, but it's not working. We see that they go off the path a lot. So there's even a scene where they're in a car when they're first starting the adventure, I suppose, and they just like get out of the car and you hear Hammond like, see, I told you, we need to make sure that the doors are locked so they can't get out. So even as they're going through this experience, it's like they're the guinea pigs in a way. They're going through this experience, and Hammond and like the security and IT guys are like, oh yeah. And Hammond's like, so we need to fix this. We need to fix this. We need to fix this. And it's mostly just they're going off the path that has been set for them. And I think it's so realistic. And I think it's interesting that Spielberg added this in, not just to create more plot and tension, but because it's so realistic to how human beings are. Like, you could literally have signs up and have all the perfect things, but someone's definitely going to go off the trail. That's just how humans are. And so it's just so interesting how the small details are so intricate to the beauty of this film and will play an important role to the beauty of this film. Okay, so my next theme is... Oh, I do want to actually talk about something else first. So as I talked about all the thing, like the creation of the park, I do want to talk about this sort of big issue in the film that is brought up and I think is tackled very well by one of the characters bringing it up and the other characters formulating that same opinion. It's that this whole park only exists for capitalism. So this whole park is just started so that they can make a way to make a lot of money and also be like the cool new thing at the expense of bringing such a dangerous predator back into the world that was once extinct for a long time ago, like from a long time ago. And it's just like, you brought it back just so you could make money and be like in magazines in our little human world, in our human time. And it's actually insane because the only thing that took out the dinosaurs was like basically the explosion of like the Big Bang size, right? So it's just sort of something so crazy out of this world took the dinosaurs out and you're bringing them back. It's on brand. It's on brand. That's all I can say. Capitalism at its finest. So I'll bring it. That just had to be mentioned in that sort of creation of the park because it's insane. Something that started as an idea in the hands of someone with a lot of money and resources just turns into another version of exploitation capitalism, and maybe something should stay buried, or at least if you dig it up, it should be researchable, understood, like the paleontologists or archaeologists are doing. But even that can be debatable because sometimes, they're going into these tombs of these people that have passed away. It's not like they're going to get their consent, but it seems to be somewhat disrespectful. Okay, so I was just talking about the morality of, or the lack thereof, of people going in and sort of looking at people's tombs and assessing that and finding research in history, but the downside of that being that they're not really getting anyone's consent to go and dig up things that have already been buried, usually really culturally based and traditionally, and going in and like messing with someone's tomb and someone's grave seems very invasive and immoral. And then most of the time they take those objects and they put them in a museum for show and to make money off of it, and those are basically stolen items. It's up for debate on the morality of that, but that's basically what's going on. In other words, I don't know. That's kind of the vibe that it gave me. And then again, it just speaks into this idea of capitalism and the issues that arise with Hammond turning something that was an idea and a project into a theme park that could be fun and interesting, but he went the extra mile by trying to be different and at the expense of people's lives. And that's where the capitalism comes into play. And there's even conversation about class involved, because we see that in a brief scene, Hammond and another individual are arguing about, oh, well, I think it's the lawyer. They're talking about how he wants this to be open for everyone, but of course, not everything can be accessible to everyone if they don't have the financial access to it. And okay, maybe affordable, but this is obviously going to be more utilized by people who have a lot more money, and the lawyer clearly wants that to be so. So there's just things like that that stand out in this situation. Okay, so again, delving more into the capitalist ideal for this topic is a big thought that the doctors and scientists brought up after getting past the awe of seeing real life dinos was, is this actually okay? Why bring back something that has long died? Can they even coexist with humans? Is this a form of foreshadowing? So basically, the doctor or the scientists and everyone who was a part of this, but specifically Grant, Ellie, and Malcolm, who come into this situation, and Malcolm really does go out of his way to be like, what is this really doing? Like, did you guys really stop to think about how this is going to affect us? And it is the thought of, why are you bringing something that has been long extinct back into the world at the expense of claiming that it's for adventure and knowledge and it's new, but really it's just going to bring you a lot of money? But did you ever think that it took an entire catastrophe to take out the dinosaurs, now bringing them into the world of human beings, trying to make them coexist in a way that's sort of like a zoo, but not in a way that's like a museum where you can go and see bones and you can get on rides, or you can get research, or things in which the field that Grant and Ellie do where they get knowledge and research. Still some things about that can be iffy, but still, it's just like, you didn't care. I think that's the point. The point isn't that they don't see some of the issues with this. The point is that they genuinely don't seem to care about those things, and that's the problem. And again, when I say they are getting out of their sort of awe moment, there's a moment where Ellie and Grant are getting out of their car and they go over and they see this omnivore dinosaur. I don't remember the name. I apologize. I'm not going to say the specific names because I can't pronounce some of them and I don't want to pronounce them incorrectly. But anyway, they see it and they're really amazed and they really want to go on this adventure. And Hammond's really trying to sell this to them in a way that he would sell this to a customer, a consumer coming in. But they go off the beaten path every time, which I talked about before. But in that same scene, they get kind of like bored of that and they're over that and they want to actually see a lot of the science going on, and they break into the science room, which they're not supposed to do. They're not supposed to go over the fourth wall, or in this case, the glass that they're looking through and observing actual scientists. So again, I think that's realistic and a really good take with Spielberg, in that people are constantly breaking the rules. People are constantly thinking outside the box, doing things that were not set on a path that you strategically wanted them to be on. And that is how the real world works, especially when you're talking about humans. So I think that's really interesting. But when I brought up, could this be a form of foreshadowing? I definitely think it can be, because this whole film is based off of an amusement park that has gone too far. And even if it hadn't been a revenge plot from Ned, so he messes up the security locks and systems, and that's how all the dinosaurs, a lot of them, get out. Thankfully, the park hasn't officially opened, But the people that are there are people that Hammond brought to sort of give him the okay, and to back him with these investors, and the lawyer brought Malcolm, and his grandkids are there to enjoy this personalized experience that their grandfather created. But now they're on this whole chaotic, traumatic experience, near-death experience, survival instincts because of one man's greed. And I think that is another attest to capitalism, where one person's greed or outlandish idea who has money, power, and access can affect so many people, and often negatively. And I mean, if really what we need to get out here is death. So what will it really take for them to realize that this isn't okay, outside of the very obvious signs of, hey, questionable liability here, and outside of like insurance people just worrying about what they'll be liable for and not making real money off of it? It's sort of like we started the film off with someone literally dying, an employee, and that's how this lawsuit started, and this is why they needed to have the backing of other people to prove to the investors, so on and so forth. But even when someone had died, they were still pushing for this. And then in this case, Hammond still wants to believe this can work, and I think by the end he kind of agrees, but then we have all these other sequels to the film, so even if he's not willing to do it, someone else is, so on and so forth. And I can't speak to those other films because I don't really remember a lot of the details. This is the one I'm focusing on mostly. But still, it's just like, if his grandkids had died, would he have been a little more like, oh yeah? Because usually it's when people are affected. And it's just things like that that really irritates me. It always takes the most extreme things, and even then, that's not enough. So again, I do think the film was foreshadowing in ways like that, and things like that. Okay, so now I'm going to break down some certain scenes. I know that I'm kind of going based off of things that stood out to me and really blocking that and trying to bring that into what I saw in the film, but that's just kind of how I'm going to do this commentary. So one of my favorite scenes was how Spielberg created tension and anxiety amongst the stress that was already the actors running from the dinosaurs, hiding, fearing that they were going to get attacked once they were let loose because of Ned and his vendetta. And ultimately, you know, whatever goes on and happens to Ned is what happens to him. But the point is that he didn't care and he felt more entitled. And the point is that Hammond probably should have never created this park in the way that he did, so on and so forth. But this is the effect of the cause, right? Cause and effect. And so when we started out, they were all together. So, I mean, Grant, Ellie, Malcolm, another one of the workers whose name I don't recall right now. And then we see the IT guys in the sort of security room where they're observing this adventure that was supposed to go on track but didn't, and Hammond's in there with them. And then they split for some odd reason. I think, oh no, it's because one of the dinosaurs gets injured and Ellie wanted to stay and help, and then they went back at a different time, and then when all hell broke loose, they were separated, and then the fear of them not knowing where each other were, not knowing what could be happening, where dinosaurs were roaming, is another extension of tension itself. But then we have a scene that's getting paralleled between Ellie having to try to manually turn back on the system because the guy who went just did not show back up and he was late, and so they were worried about him, which I'll get into next because it's another part of the scene that I really enjoy. But it's also the fact that Ellie is basically going to be controlling the fence and trying to turn on the electricity that is now off, but Grant and Lex, and those are the two grandchildren of Hammond, by the way, and Grant is another one of the paleontologists, if that's what he goes by. I'm going to call him that, but scientist. And they're trying to get over the fence because it's not currently turned on because they're trying to get to the other part of the park away from what they were running from. But Tim gets shocked when she turns it back on. And before that, this alarm was going off, so they're very alarmed, like, oh my gosh. But while they're crawling on this fence, you're getting the parallel of Ellie possibly turning it on. It's just other things going on that Spielberg creates that also makes the fear of running from dinosaurs even worse. And it's just so well done and entertaining, and I love that. And then there's another scene right after that where Ellie gets attacked by a dinosaur. So she sort of has this celebratory moment. And then this dinosaur comes out and like attacks her, tries to kill her. And she manages to get it behind like a gate, a cage. And after she's already gotten the system back on. So that's a win-win. Electricity's working. Everyone's fine now. Anyway, we get to the point where we see... It's not funny, but it's just so wild. We see this arm and she thinks, oh my gosh, it's Arnold. He was hiding. He's fine. I'm so glad you're here. But it's actually his hand and his arm detached from his body, and she freaks out. And it's just things like that where Spielberg, again, gives us this fear without really having to give us too much. And I thought that was a really good scene just in the way that it was executed. And again, without telling us or giving us the whole story about what happened to Arnold, you don't really need to know the specifics. You know it was bad enough that his arm was ripped off. You know that he's dead. And you know that it's probably that dinosaur that just attacked Ellie. And the way that you have this sense of, yay, relief, congratulations, something went well, just for it to turn around and be like, oh my God, what's happening? Like the pacing and the tension and the fear and how it's created at different complex levels. So well executed. It's so good. And then another scene that I really enjoyed was the kitchen scene where Lex and Tim are running from two dinos. And it's good in that they're even, right? So it's one against one. It's two people against two people, right? And they're in a kitchen where it's very industrialized. It's sort of like a cafeteria or a restaurant kitchen, a lot of steel and a lot of clattering of dishes. And they had just gotten done eating. And now you have a scene where it's like eat or be eaten. And it's just like fight for survival. But it's these tiny kids who thought that they were finally at peace and they were going to be able to move on and now they could just eat something. But now they're getting attacked again and there's no adults to be able to run in and save them. And in a way, the adults do come back, obviously, and help them. But the kids have to fight for themselves in that moment. It is about fight or flight, nothing else. And so again, Spielberg brings on that tension, and it's so good. And I will say that something, even though this film is older and the CGI isn't the greatest, it's still so well done in that it looks good still in 2023. And I don't think that's something that could be accomplished if the artist and the prosthetics and everything hadn't been taken into consideration and enough time had been given into it, because it's so good. It still looks so good. So I think that's another thing that made this film great, is everything just looks so realistic. The tension, the pacing, everything that Spielberg did was just so well executed. Again, incredible. All right, so I'm going to go to my conclusion and then I'll get into my quote segment. I'm trying not to make this video too long because I didn't really have a lot of topics on it, and I did have to record it a few times. I took a break, so there are probably things that I missed, maybe things that I'll add on, but ultimately I just wanted to get to the summary and break down some scenes while still giving you an idea of how the film was. And of course it's Jurassic Park, so most people have seen it, but still. So the conclusion, it's a stunning film that tugs at your fear and your interest and puts it into this capitalistic approach of knowledge in such a way that is so believable, because I'm surprised that no billionaires have tried this. Maybe they have and we just haven't heard about it, but let's hope that that's the case and it's because it's never going to happen. But it's wild. It's wild. How far is too far? Should we be waiting for people to die to deem them or that as a moment of truth? No, we should not be waiting for that. But unfortunately, that is what always happens. And this is just some questions that came up and thoughts for the conclusion, but also as I was watching the film that I noted. So I'm just bringing it up for conversation if you guys wanted to comment about it or your ideas about it or anything that's sort of similar to this film. Maybe not on this large of a scale because obviously not, but still. And then it's a classic for a reason. I can't say anything about the franchise in general, but this first film is so worthy of its praise. Great cast and performances. Also, I have to note, how did I not know that Samuel L. Jackson was in this movie? I totally did not remember him being in this movie. And by the way, this is a great, like I said before, great cast. everyone and the familiar faces that showed up when I watched it again, I was like, oh, I know this person, I know this person. But Samuel was the one that really stood out because I was like, I do not remember him being in Jurassic Park. And how did I not remember that? It's so weird. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to my quote segment. Malcolm. God creates dinosaurs. God destroys dinosaurs. God creates man. Man destroys God. Man creates dinosaurs. Ellie. Dinosaurs eat man. Woman inherits the earth. Malcolm. Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. So, what are you thinking? Grant. We're out of a job. Malcolm. Don't you mean extinct? Thanks, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
That's not funny.
That was great.